But Paul's not thinking that. He still has this very strong belief that God's truth is still very strong and real. And even though he connects that to the fact that he's in prison, he's still encouraging Timothy to continue that work that is worth doing, that kind of a work. In fact, while he's in prison, the work Paul has to do in prison, it might seem to us like, well, what are you going to do now? Because you can't really go anywhere. You can't really do anything. And it's only at the end of all this that he says, oh, I finished my race. So until then, when he's in prison, what work is he really doing? So the thing about that that's important is, perhaps we think, oh, when I'm healthy and active and I have a job or things are going my way, maybe then I could do things. But if God wants me to work when I'm broke, or I don't have friends, or I don't have the job I asked for, or my education's not really good, if God wants me to do something here, I can't really do anything because it's like prison. There isn't any options available to me. So here I have to basically be retired. Once I might have done something, but now I can't do it. Maybe that's what we think. Unless I had options and possibilities, I can't really do anything really for God here. But you can see that Paul's doing some really important work in prison because he's keeping Timothy's spirits up. He's telling him that he should still trust in this God. And he's doing that from inside the prison, which, if you think about it, is pretty remarkable because while he has no possibility of getting out, he's encouraging him to continue believing in this God and to do the work that he's been given to do. So maybe when you're in a prison kind of life, the work would look different, but it doesn't mean you can say, I don't have to do this any longer. I don't have to believe in God. I don't have to pray. I don't have to read the Bible. I don't have to tell people to have hope or faith. I don't have to do that anymore because I'm in a circumstance, I don't have those things. So I don't have to help. That's not true. The work might shift and look different, but you still are obligated to carry this for God. And if you look at Paul's life, you can make the argument, well, this seems like a waste of your life. You're a very educated person. You had a lot of connections. He was even a Roman citizen, which means it's pretty extraordinary that a Jew could become one. So he certainly had a lot of possibilities that he could have gone very far in life. Instead, he became a prisoner for Jesus and ended his life in that prison. So you could make the argument, oh, well, your life, you didn't really accomplish a lot. Because after all, there were all these options you had. You gave those up, and look, now it's going to end way too soon. You're not an old man. So you're going to finish your life without having done certain things. Now, that's where that last part that we read is important. So again, I'm just pointing it out to you. He says, I know who I have believed, and I'm convinced that he is able to guard what I have entrusted to him for that day. So we don't know what that day means, but he's basically saying there are things I haven't really completed. There are things that I didn't really get to the end of like I thought I was going to, but I've put my faith in the right person. So I'm going to give him that too. The part I wasn't able to finish, I'm going to give it to him. And I know that he will take care of it. When it's the right time, he will get those things done. Now, just imagine it a little differently. If you work in a job where you have assignments, a task to do, perhaps you work on that task till your hours are done. Then maybe you hand it over to the next team and you go home. So the assumption is whatever you did not finish, the next set of people will finish, right? Unless you work in a place where you're required to take it from start to finish. So most of the time you're handing it over saying you finished the job. Whatever I could do, I did. Now you have to finish this job, right? And that means it's the responsibility of the person who's been given this to finish the work. Most of the time we think like, well, God gave me something, so this is mine, not anybody else's. So whatever I do, I have to receive from it, and this has to be good for me. If it isn't good for me, it's not worth my time. I'm just going to throw it out because it's not worth anything. But the things we do are linked to many other things. There are scenarios in our life where we're not able to finish certain things, or where we're not able to accomplish everything we would have liked, where it's not the way we expected things to go. In most of those scenarios, we just give up. We just throw it out. We toss the whole thing, despite all the time we put into it, we'll just get rid of it. But you can see Paul's attitude here is something we can adopt, which is, all right, I've done certain things, but I haven't done everything. So now I can no longer do the things that I wanted to do, everything that I wanted to do. So I'm not embarrassed, though. I'm not ashamed because I wasn't able to finish. I'm not ashamed of all the decisions I've made in going with God. So I know I believed in the right person. So I'm going to hand it over to him because I trust him to do this. I trust him to finish this thing. And think about it like if you have a cell phone. Everyone has a cell phone. Let's say that you had to go into a place you can't carry your cell phone. What do? And you give it to somebody who you trust to hold on to it. So when you come back out and you're done with whatever you have to do, you can ask that person, give me back my phone, and they will give it to you. You would not give it to a random person on the street. You don't know them. You don't trust them. You don't give it to people that you don't have any faith in because there's no guarantee this will come back to you, right? I think we can all understand that concept. So similarly, there are scenarios in our life where we have become very embittered by them, and we have either thrown them out or harbored a lot of resentment against God for things not working out. But option C, which we have never considered, I think, is to hand it over to God so he can finish the work. Maybe you're not able to finish it, but he's the author and the finisher. So he has to finish the work, right? And finishing the work might take some time. I don't know if you've ever had your shoes fixed by someone that works on shoes, right? I had this pair of boots that I liked, and they were not very expensive, but I liked them. So the zipper was broken. So I said, I'm going to take this to this guy, and he's going to fix it, so I'll just do that. So I took it to the person, and he looked at it, and then he looked back at me, and he's like, all right, look, these are cheap boots. It's going to cost you more to fix it than it's actually worth. Next time this thing breaks, throw it in the garbage, okay? Don't bring it to me. You're wasting your money. So basically, in effect, he's saying, you're putting too much investment in this thing that's not worth the investment. And even though it's costing him money by saying that, he could just have ignored it and fixed it and handed it back. He's basically telling me, you're putting too much. And based on my expertise on what I do, which is fixing shoes, this is not worth your investment, right? And think of it this way. There's a lot of things we are putting a lot into, and nobody's going to tell us one way or another whether it's worth your time or not. There are things that God will tell us, put it to the side. There are things that God will tell us, hand it over to me. I got to fix this right. But we don't do either. Either we take it and we bury it in some sort of resentment, or we cling to it saying, I got this. I know what to do. I know how to finish it. It's just going to take some time and I have to do certain things, but God is telling you to hand it over because only he can finish it. And only he knows how this is supposed to go. But most importantly, if you look at Paul's attitude here, he's very specifically saying, I don't really see myself as a failure at all. Whatever I could do with what he has given me, I did it. I took care of it. Now I'm handing you some things to do, and I'm handing God the things that I was not able to finish because he has to finish those things. I could trust him to finish whatever I had started, which was a good trust, as you can see by the spread of Christianity since then to now, that clearly God had a handle on those things. And you can see that Paul even says in verse 14, guard the good deposit that was entrusted to you. Guard it with the help of the Holy Spirit who lives in us. We might think of, I have this talent or I have that talent. That's what God gave me. But really, the deposit God has given us is this faith that God's purpose will work out in our life. That thing can die, though. If we trust it to the wrong person, or if we continue to hold on to it instead of letting God finish it, that faith that we have can easily be extinguished. But like Paul is saying here, well, I did what I could. Now I'm going to give it to God, and he's going to have to finish the work because I can't do it. That surrendering part, it takes a different kind of attitude. You still have to have the spark that is pushing you to do certain things, even if the scenario has changed for you and you're not able to do things the way you thought you were going to do them. So you don't see a prisoner here who's defeated by his circumstances. Neither is he planning for some life like, oh, when I get out, I'm going to do this and that. He's not doing that either. He's simply saying, whatever I could do, I did, but don't give up in your faith. Don't give up on what God gave you to do. Work on it till the last minute, and then you're out of time, you hand it over. You give it over to God and let Him finish what needs to be done. But it takes a certain kind of mentality that says, I'm not giving up. I'm not going to take another route. I'm not going to change my mind and do something else right now. So this has to be some kind of a fire that cannot be put out, right? No matter what the circumstances, there has to be a little bit of spark that is still there, right? Let's look at Genesis 25. This is an example of somebody that's not really like that. Genesis 25, verse 29, down a little bit. Okay. Now you know the story probably. This is how Esau sold his birthright to his younger brother, Jacob. Now, since we already know the story, perhaps you already think out of the two boys, Jacob is the more talented, more able, and more blessed one. That's why he ended up getting whatever he got, right? But that's not really the case. You can see that Esau is the person who has ability. In fact, if you read verse 27, it tells you Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country. Well, Jacob was a quiet man, staying among the tents. If you want to put it differently, you can say Jacob had nothing to do with his life. But Esau, he was out hunting, right? Which was the job of the man. But we don't see Jacob really doing much of anything at this point in his life. He just simply is there. But Esau has talents. He has ability. He's able to hunt. He's able to do certain things. And in that scenario, you can look at Esau as a person who is an able-bodied and talented person. What he needs to do, he gets done. If he has a goal in mind, he's going to work and accomplish those things. He's very focused on those goals. So if it's worth my time, I will produce something. If it's not going to produce for me, I'm just going to throw it away because it isn't worth anything to me. That's a very realistic person. And really, people like that in life will succeed because they cut their losses and they move on when they need to. It's not a very complicated way of thinking at all. And now Esau, in this story, you can see he has an immediate desire or need. He came back from working, he's hungry, and he's focused on that. Now, from what he can see, he sees that there is food that Jacob is cooking. So he's telling him, let me have some of that. But Jacob, being a tricky person, says, well, first, sell me your birthright. Now, first of all, hardly an even trade, right? What? You want my birthright for what? A bowl of stew? No, that doesn't make any sense. One is worth a lot more than the other. But I also want to point out to you, do you know what a birthright looks like? Can you hold it in your hand? Can you trade it for money? Can you take it as an education, as a degree, so you can move to something? And if the answer is no to everything I just asked you, then is it real? And for a person like Esau, it is not. Whatever he needed in his life, he had the talent and the drive to accomplish it. Not because he was the oldest, because this is who he was. So as far as he's concerned, what has that birthright ever given him? He's never seen it. He's never got anything from receiving it. Similarly, you can see the favor of God is an invisible thing, or the work of God is an invisible thing. So when it's a rough time, when you are hungry for something, it might be tempting to trade this for something that you could put in your stomach. After all, what has that ever given me? I can't see in front of me right now. Right now, what you're doing is judging the circumstance you can see. With your eyes, what do you see? Oh, well, I'm hungry, and there is that food right there that he's making, and he wants something for it that's not even real to me. It's never given me anything. Being a Christian, walking with God, only suffering, only difficulty. What has it ever given me at all? And in fact, he even says, look, I'm about to die. What good is my birthright to me? Right? So he's judged this situation very clearly. Look, if I don't eat, I'm going to die. So I'm not going to get what I want. This isn't worth anything if I'm going to die right now. He's judged the circumstance, right? Now, you could look at it with different eyes, with God's eyes that sees past the temporary situation and say, you're not going to die because you missed a meal. All right? You might feel like you're dying, but you're not. In fact, your birthright is a very valuable thing that God gave you. And He gave it to you so He can bless you later with it and your generations with it. And He made you the firstborn for some reason. He had some purpose in mind when He gave this to you, because after all, Jacob was meant to be more blessed than Esau. So He gave you something. Don't trade it away just because right now things don't look good and you're thinking realistically, I have goals, I got to get these accomplished. If I have to trade it, that's what I will do. Don't do that. But we're not thinking like that ever. Jacob is thinking like that. He's seeing things past the temporary moment right now, and he's saying, well, Esau might be strong today, but I will be strong tomorrow. And he thinks this stew is worthwhile, but I think that birthright is worthwhile. So his focus is completely different from Esau's focus, and ultimately, the reason Jacob gets this birthright is because Esau looked at his circumstances and said, this isn't worth anything. If I continue down this path of valuing my birthright, I'm going to die. I won't even have food to eat because I'm holding on to this thing. So it's not worth the effort of continuing this way. I have strength. I can hunt. I can produce for myself. I don't need that birthright. So just give it away because right now, what I need is food. And this is not to criticize his attitude, but to point out how similar it is to the way we think. We're thinking about what we see. Maybe we see empty bank accounts. Maybe we see friends who don't want to talk to us. Maybe we see family that walks away from us. So because we see these things, which are not illusions, they're real, because we see them, we make certain kinds of judgments. And our judgments are based on facts as we see them right now. Well, if I'm in prison, if things are not working out, then I have to make a trade. Then I have to focus on what's available to me. What's available to me is I have this job and I have to work 24/7 if I have to make any money. So I might not be able to go to church. That's just how it is. I might be too tired to worry about praying. That's just how it's going to be because I have to feed myself. I have to worry about this. So something has gotten placed to the side, but we're not paying any attention to that something because we're focused on right now. Right now, we think of this birthright as a lost cause. What is it worth to me? That's what Esau says to Jacob. What good is this birthright to me because I'm going to die? Now, if you look at his statement, realistically, we know that's ridiculous. You're not going to die. This is a temporary problem. You shouldn't trade something so valuable, but it's so easy to say this to a man in a story. And so hard to say this to ourselves. Because very quickly we trade away what's really valuable in our life, whether it's our fear of God or our persistence in the face of adversity or our desire to continue to work with God. Those things we very quickly trade away when things get really hard for us. And we think, well, right now that's not important. I have to feed myself. Right now what's important is I take care of my needs. And this is what I have to do, so be it. And the trade has been made, right? That Jacob gave Esau the food. He ate and drank. He got up and left. He traded. He has no problem with the trade. But it says very clearly at the end of the story, so Esau despised his birthright. And maybe you think, well, that's not really fair. I don't hate God. I don't despise God. But if we're willing to trade him for something that we get right now, after all, that is exactly what it is. We have basically told God it's not worth it for me to stick with you. I don't know that I trust you to do that. You know, the other day in class, one of my students, he was on his phone. This is what they always are doing, but he's on his phone. And then finally I was like, I'm fed up with this kid. So I was like, look, you have to take your Regents exam in a week. You're always on your phone. Give me the phone. He's like, what? And he picks up the phone and starts putting it in his pocket. He's like, what? No, I don't want to give you my phone. I was like, why? Why? You want to hide something from me on this so I don't text your mom? He's like, no, what? Don't get any ideas. So he shuts the phone off, right? Locks it up because I said those things. And I said, look, I'm not going to touch your phone or look at your phone, but you're going to give me the phone because you're not doing any work. He's like, oh, okay. So he made sure it's shut off completely, so there's no way for me to turn it on and go into his phone. I wouldn't do it anyway, but he doesn't trust me not to. So he hands it over once he shut everything off. And then he was okay and he didn't really care that I had it. But if it was open, he didn't trust that I wouldn't go through it and do things he didn't want me to do with his phone, because his trust was very limited to the fact that if it's off, she doesn't know how to get into it. So it's okay. Then you can hold it. But while it's on, I don't trust you, right? And that's not necessarily about whether he trusts me as a person, but it's certainly about how far we would trust God with something that's important to us. We do trust him to an extent. It's okay to an extent. But do we really trust him to the point of saying, oh, I'm going to sit around and wait for you when I'm hungry, when I'm suffering, when things are difficult? Well, we don't trust him with that deposit. You know, Paul's saying, well, I'm just going to hand this over to him. I'm going to trust that I am giving it to the right person, and he's able to complete this work. I'm going to continue to do it because it's worth my time. We're more like Esau. We judge our current situation, and we make a lot of foolish decisions that affect us later based on our current situation because we don't have the eyes to see it. Even if we are important in God's eyes, firstborn, have a birthright, even so, we're willing to say, yeah, but I've got things to fix right now. And this is a child of God that thinks this way, right? If we look at the book of Ruth, here's another example, but a better one. Let's look at chapter 1. And if someone could read verse 5 down a little bit. I'm going to read this part. The part before it, which I'm not reading, it tells you the story that you guys already know, I think, about all the things that happened to Naomi, right? So her husband's dead, her children are dead. She has 2 daughters-in-law with her. And around verse 5, you can see that it says that both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When she heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. So once she's had all these horrible things happen to her, the people are buried now. They're dead and buried, her husband and her sons. So she's left only with 2 women that are only related to her by marriage. And then she hears that back in her home in Israel, that food is returning. So the famine is over. She can go back and get food now. So things are taking a turn for the better. And then you see that she's preparing to go back to that because things are getting better, right? And of course, this is a very realistic scenario because once you're having a hard time, you can see not many people want to stick around for that. But when things are getting better for you, everybody will want to be your friend because after all, we like fair weather, right? Now, she's ready to go back. And this is the part everybody knows, I think. Verse 8 down. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud and said to her, we will go back with you to your people. Now, she's ready to go back. She's packed to go back. And then all of a sudden, she says to these 2 women, you don't have to come. You can go back to your home. I mean, you've been loyal, you've worked hard, and you did the best you could possibly do, but you don't have to come with me. There's nothing there for you, so you might as well just go back home, and maybe you'll find someone else to marry. You still have a life you can live, but coming with me, there's only emptiness. And to be more clear, you can see verse 11. Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you. because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. Okay, look at the way Naomi thinks, and I hope that you recognize yourself, because she's thought everything out. Just like Esau, she's planned out her entire life, all the possibilities. Okay, you want to get married to more people related to me. Well, I don't have any sons. I don't have a husband. Let's say I got married and I had a son. You still would have to wait around for the child to grow up. You're not, then at that point it's too late. There's many scenarios she says right now. If this happened, or if this happened, or if this happened, in any of those scenarios, Naomi basically is telling the two girls it's not going to work out. Whether it's scene A or B or C, God can't work. You might as well go back somewhere else. There isn't anything for you here. Remember, the people in her family that have died, they're buried. But Naomi continues to carry them with her as marks of failure. If you stick with me, even though she's going back to the land of bread, she's going back to God's country, and there's bread there. There is. Even though that's the scenario, she has decided there's nothing here. And since there's nothing with this God is a beggar. So if you stick with me, you'll become a beggar too. And I don't want you to have a miserable life, but things are not working out for me, so it's best you don't stick with me because it's not going to work out for you. And it should make you a little uncomfortable, but let's be realistic. This is what we think. We might talk about, oh, God can give you all these things, but our faith has starved to death. Because of the things that have happened in our life, we have allowed those things that have died to become marks of failure on our faith. And because they are these marks of failure, whatever spark of faith we had that said, all right, I'm going to try again. All right, I'm going to go back and find this God again. I'm going to make some effort. Because of that, that part is completely dead. So that even when she's going back to this God who has plenty to give, she has planned out every scene that could possibly happen, according to her way of thinking, and said, none of those scenes have anything to give you. I have nothing to hand to you. And we do this all the time. We make plan A, we make plan B, we make plan C. If this doesn't work out, there's this. If that doesn't work out, there's this. And if you've been a Christian long enough, you might even be so cynical to the point of saying, no matter what plan I make, it's not going to work out. No matter what, I'm going to fail. So why even bother? In fact, since I'm already going to fail, I've decided that's who I am. But I don't want you to stick with me. Go do whatever else, Go find something else to do. Go live some other life. Or maybe you have already planned out your life right now and said, I'm going to do something else. This isn't for me. Because this place doesn't have anything. So since this place has no life, in effect what you've said is, this God has nothing to give me. He has nothing in his pockets. So it's not really worth the time. But I already wasted my life. I don't want my kids to waste their life. I don't want my future generations to be stuck here. You go do something else. Don't come back with me. Anyway, too late for me, but you make some other life choice, right? Because whatever existed in you that God put there, you have completely extinguished it out. Now you can see Ruth, right? Who is, of course, a Moabite. She is a foreigner. And she has no relation to Naomi except that she was once married to her son, who is now dead. So after all, Ruth too should think like Naomi is thinking. Oh yeah, I don't have a husband. She makes a good point. I could just cut it off right now, right? And go back to my life. Maybe I have another shot. If I stay here, I can do certain things. It's not worth sticking to her. She only has negativity anyway, right? And then you see in verse 14, it says, Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, right? So she left. She's like, all right, she makes a point. But it says Ruth clung to her. And you see verse 16, but Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Now, of all of these remarkable statements she makes, this is the last one that's particularly remarkable. When she says, your God will be my God. Who wants a failure of a God? Who wants a God that's only given you death and famine? Especially when Naomi tells and preaches to her, that's exactly the case. Oh, stick with this God, this is what you're going to get. You might as well leave, cut your losses. But still, here's Ruth, remarkable in a vacuum that there would be a spark. You know, if you want to make a fire, I strongly advise you don't, but if you want to make a fire, you need oxygen. You cannot make it in a vacuum, right? Fire needs oxygen to grow. So when you make a fire, you do the spark, but then you feed the fire. You give it paper or wood or whatever it might be so that it has something to keep it going. Even something like what they call the eternal flame, that is sometimes at gravesites like John F. Kennedy's gravesite, is kept alive with a source of fuel, without which it would be completely extinguished, eternal or not. And ultimately, if you don't feed this, it will die. That's how it goes. But what Ruth has here, what Paul had in prison there, is a remarkable thing. It's something that exists with no food. A fire that burns with no oxygen. Because there's nothing to make this flame of faith that Ruth has grow in any way. Nothing in her life has taught her, this God is worth my time, this woman is worth my time, this effort is worth my time. Nothing in her life has taught her that. Up to this point, she has not seen any success in her life. Maybe you were thinking of the Ruth in a couple of chapters later. But that part of Ruth does not exist yet. So for Ruth to say these things and say, I'm going to stay with you, don't talk to me anymore about leaving, right? I'm going to stick with you and your people and your God and whatever it might be. I'm going to stay there. This spark that she has can only be something that God gave her, because nothing else would have kept us alive. You know, this push that you have where you diagnose life and death without knowing or seeing. If you looked at the scenario like Naomi and you said, oh, look, this is dead. Well, you're not a doctor. Anybody could do that. Anybody could look at something with no breath and say, well, that's dead. But not anybody can be a prophet in a valley of bones and say, well, God, you alone know if this can live. Looks dead, but you know something I don't know, right? To me, it looks dead, but to you, you might seem like there's the possibility of life. But to have that kind of faith, you would have to have someone feeding you some oxygen. But she doesn't even have that. And yet she's saying, no, I'm still going to stick here. I'm still going to do this. But in Naomi's way of thinking, there's no possibility where God's going to work. You know, you've starved this of all its oxygen, and you're thinking, well, there's no way God's going to do anything. So you're simply doing things for the sake of doing it, you know? Naomi's going back home. And why is she even going then? She's so bitter and unhappy. You know, there could be people that go to church like every week who consider themselves religious, but they're getting nothing out of this God. Their hearts are just stones. There's no spark whatsoever left. And they spread this like a disease to people around them. So Naomi is telling her, this is a waste of your time. I've already thought it out. I don't see how anything's going to work out for you. Only one chapter later, you can see Ruth meets Boaz. One chapter later. You don't know what's going to happen later. Only God knows those things. But don't close your door to every possibility when you're the someone who's supposed to be maintaining a spark. And now you can see someone like Ruth. Let me tell you, everything in life can fail you. Literally everything. However, the spark that God put in you, like when He made human beings, and He made them out of the dust of the earth, He left them with the breath of life. And you might think that's about life and death. But the thing that keeps you living is not simply that you breathe, but the spark that God put in you that says it looks like it's over, but it's only over when God's done with it. I think I can still do something. I think there's still something here, right? This is a very short poem by Emily Dickinson, right? You cannot put a fire out A thing that can ignite can go itself without a fan upon the slowest night. You cannot fold a flood and put it in a drawer because the winds would find out and tell your cedar floor, right? So the idea is you can't put out something that's always going to come back with a spark. So you could crush God down to size and say he can't do anything here. This place is dead. There's no way he could work in this life. This is a desert. You could say that, but God puts sparks in people for a reason. That thing will self-ignite. You could deprive it of all the oxygen you want, but still someone like Ruth will succeed. And you might say, if you were Ruth, why cling to Naomi? You know, she's a desert. She's a bitter person. She's got nothing to offer. Still, Ruth is clinging to her to go back into Israel and become an Israelite, even though she's a foreigner herself. And it seems like a pointless task because there's no life there, right? And God might have put you many places, even with many people, that seem poisonous at best. I'm just being real honest right now. If at least once a day you haven't met someone like this, let's trade lives. Because definitely there are people like this. And you know, sometimes for me personally, when I have to work with the adults in my workplace more than I have to work with the students, that's a hard time. I'd rather work with the kids who at least eventually will become better people. But sometimes you have to have these scenarios and you might think, oh, I'm just not going to deal with them. But God made you deal with them. He put you with these people. And you could say, I'm cutting off everything. I'm going to keep moving in my direction. Well, we don't have to be a Ruth, I guess. But Ruth decided, I'm going to cling to this person. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to find this because God put the spark in her. It died in Naomi, so he took it and transplanted it into Ruth. And because of that, Ruth found Boaz. Ruth had a child who eventually became the grandfather of David. None of this is something Ruth could have known. But it definitely was something Naomi didn't even have any faith to believe in. But still God worked, right? Still in the vacuum, he put the spark in somebody and made this go back into a flame. Even when we did our best to quench this fire, he brought it back. In his way, he brought it back. Even if you eliminated all the possibilities and how God could work in your life, you watch. He will bring it back to life. You might not get to eat it because you don't want this God and you're trading him for better food, but you'll have to watch when the fire comes back to life because it will happen. If you trust it to the right person, which is God, he can finish the job you're not able to do. Let's look at Mark chapter 5. Here's another example of this. Let's read verse 1 down a little bit. Mark chapter 5. So, I'm going to point out to you in verse 2, it said, when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him, right? So the man who is possessed here with legion of demons came to greet Jesus, right? Now, there's a lot of things going on in this town. Everybody in this town is affected by this legion of demons before Jesus even shows up. How do you know that? Well, when Jesus got in the boat to even come here, there was a storm trying to keep him from getting to this place. And you can see that in the story right before it. There's a huge storm, and Jesus has to calm the storm, right? He has to speak to all the waves and the wind and everything so that he can continue on and come to this place. So the legion of demons are not just controlling this man and his life and making him miserable. This legion's effects are spread across the whole town and even across the water, trying to stop Jesus himself from coming to this place. Don't think that your negativity is only affecting your life. It's spreading like a disease to everybody around you. It's affecting them too. And people are looking at you for some hope, and you're only giving them some idea that there is no hope. And when you see the scenario, you can see when it describes this man in the tombs, and they try to chain him up. He breaks all the chains, and he's cutting himself. He's living in a place of death. But when Jesus comes onto the shore, this man with a legion of demons comes to greet Jesus. Now, you got to look at this and wonder what's going on. Because what's controlled by the spirits is affecting him in a life of death, right? He lives in the tombs. He's chained up all the time. He's cutting himself. He's miserable. And even when he talks to Jesus, he's saying things like, swear to God, you won't torture me. But something inside this man is still very alive that goes all the way to the shore to greet Jesus. Even though those demons, which are thousands of demons, right? They're not one or two, are controlling him to the point that his life is a wasteland. Still, there's some spark inside this man that goes all the way to meet Jesus when he gets there. How is that possible? How could he be so controlled by the evil in his life and still find something in him that says, I'm going to go meet Jesus? Still find this scenario where he comes to go in front of Jesus. And then Jesus is asking him, well, what's your name? My name is Legion, he replied, for we are many. He doesn't even get to speak for himself. The demons name themselves. They don't let the guy talk. He's not talking. It's the demons that are talking and saying, oh, this is who we are. There's a lot of us. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot that's affecting us. You might think that your life is split into many parts. There's so many things I have to do. So many people who want me to do this, that, and the other thing. So many places I have obligations. There's still a spark God put in you. There's still something alive that is not dead inside you. And that something alive should recognize this Jesus. You can make the argument, oh, there's so many things I have to do, so many obligations that I have, and he doesn't even know his own name. That's how bad this is controlling him. Still, he was able to meet Jesus on the shore when Jesus got off the boat, right? Even if the demons would send a storm to stop Jesus from coming there, still the man had something in him to go meet Jesus on the shore, right? There was still that bit left in him. You know, if you're looking for perfection and then you're going to go do work for God, well, good luck with that, because it's unlikely to happen. If God was only interested in perfect people, he would have just gone right back to heaven when he saw all those disciples, right? What a waste of time. Gotta go. I'll come back when I can find perfect people, right? Obviously, that's not going to happen. But still, he worked with the people he picked out to make them into the men that he wanted them to become. He was able to see that spark of something he put in them that is eventually going to become a fire. So he's still able to see that, right? The other day when I was at work, the day was over and I was about to leave, and I saw this one kid in the hall, and he had his jacket on, just looked like everybody else. But when he turned around, I recognized him, and he was someone I had years ago. So he had graduated and he's in school. And this kid was very, very bright, but a complete screw up, right? So he would fail everything, never do any work. He would even fail a whole grade level, despite the fact that his intelligence was much higher than most kids around him. So no matter what you talk to him about it, you give him little speeches, you try to help him with organizing his work, it didn't matter. He would just fail. It was really miraculous that he even graduated high school. And he came from a family with really nothing to offer him, no support, just a complete mess. And when I saw him there, I was like, oh, what are you doing now? I expected him to say something like, oh, I'm working or something. And then he says, well, I'm in college. I was like, really? And he's like, you don't have to sound so surprised. I was like, okay, I am surprised. He's like, okay, but I went to college, and then suddenly, I figured things out. And I got a scholarship, and they put me in an honors program. And then I'm going to transfer to this school. So he's explaining all these things, and it's not that I'm shocked that he's able to do them. I was shocked that he was able to find that part of him and make it come alive again. Because I never see it. I never see it. It's like winning the lottery. Never see this happening. Because the odds are stacked against you becoming a success. It's not just for this particular person I'm talking about. I'm talking about for all of us. The odds are stacked against you for you to be successful. But don't be like Esau and think that means you already know how this is going to work. Don't be like Naomi and already decide what your fate is before things even happen for you. Don't look at like the world looks at things with their eyes and decide you already know how this is going to play out. No, you don't. Because God's involved with this. So even if it looks a certain way, it doesn't mean it's going to work the way you think it's going to work. This guy has lived in a graveyard. He has never seen hope in his life. Even when he sees the Son of God, all he can think is, this guy's going to torture me. And still so, he came to go meet Jesus, right? And you see that Jesus drives these demons out of him. And once the demons are out of him, you can see the man, it says in verse 18, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him, right? So that part of him is the real part of him from the beginning of the story. When he came to meet Jesus, it's still the same man. Because at the end, he's saying, can I go with you? Remember, first he came to the boat to go meet Jesus. It's that real part of him that was still alive despite 1,000 demons living in his body, right? That part was still alive. And everybody in this town was affected by those demons. So you can see when Jesus sends them into the pigs, it says he gave them permission. The evil spirits came out, went into the pigs. What did the pigs do? The herd, about 2,000 in number, so at least 2,000 demons, right? Rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Within 2 seconds of the demons going into the pigs, it killed off the pigs, right? It's lived in this man for how long? And he didn't die. All this time, those demons lived in him. What you think, because he's a human being and not a pig, that's why he lived? Or is it because the spark that God put in him and kept him alive all that time until Jesus showed up for him? And you know that's true because he's not dead like the pigs are dead. And it's not because pigs are unclean. It's not because God hates bacon. It's because God kept him alive to meet Jesus. He gave him a spark that kept him alive. Come on, look at your life circumstance. Anyone should be dead by now. And still here you are, heart beating, still walking. And if you think it's only you that thinks that about your life, I guarantee you someone in your life has at least once asked you, how are you living? How are things working out? How did you do this thing that nobody else is able to do? How were you able to accomplish it? Of course, the answer is not your ability. It's not because by birthright you suddenly did something. It's because God has a spark he put inside you. So the situation has not consumed you. It hasn't eaten you alive, right? Like the burning bush, there's a fire, but the fire does not consume it. It's alive. It might be suffering, but it has not eaten up the fiery bush, right? So this part is still alive in this man. In fact, you can see that the people, when they go to see what happened, and when they see the man who doesn't have his demons anymore, they're afraid. And they're telling Jesus, yeah, I need you to go. Can you leave? Which seems like a very confusing reaction to see a miracle and tell God, I need you to go. I need you to not be here. But if you think about it, not that confusing, because look around you. Everybody with a miracle is still here? Oh no, they are not. And in fact, when you get your miracle, first you are shocked that this miracle even happened. After all, it's a disruption. You expected that this man would have his demons until the day he died, right? And you tried to control him, you tried to chain him up, and you couldn't keep him in one place. You couldn't chain up these demons, no matter how hard you tried. Don't think you can control the problems in your life with your chains. Good luck. These are supernatural. It is beyond you to chain it up and keep it in one spot. And you know that, right? Because it has escaped you many times. So it's time to admit that you have something else you should be focused on than your problems. And in fact, when you see the people in the town, when the man is free from his problems, now they're afraid. He was afraid before. As long as he was crazy, everybody else was fine with it. Because he held all the demons, right? Now the demons have been set loose. And now they're afraid. And rather than trust that Jesus can take care of that, because they just watched it happen, they're thinking, you know what, you brought this problem. Before, it was just that guy, and I don't care about him. I was fine. But you came here and you messed things up. You know, I had a set life. I had a set plan. I knew what I was doing, and you came over here and changed things up. I need you to go. I need you to leave so I can go back to the life that I had when nothing was actually working the way it's supposed to, but I was okay with it. Nothing was what I needed it to be, but I just dealt with it. Things were not making me happy, but that was my life and I was controlling it. I need you to leave. Don't think that the demons were only affecting this man. From that storm to every single man in town, the demons were controlling the entire place. And when Jesus came, they had to go. And they were destroying everything in their path. But on the water, Jesus told the storm, be quiet. And he walked across it. On the land, he told the demons, you're going to leave. And you could go over there and kill those things, but you're not killing this guy. Because no matter where Jesus was, they couldn't hang out. They had to leave. They couldn't stay in the same spot with him. And ultimately, the clinging that you're doing to Jesus, maybe you think, I've lost a lot of things. And you have. Maybe you think this life is a prison life. And there are things I'm no longer even able to do. So be it. The things you cannot finish, you give it to God, and he finishes them. The things that he gave you to do, you keep the spark so you can keep walking towards it. But don't give up before the story is written, right? Don't decide you already know how this is going to go. If you were that smart, you wouldn't be here in the first place. If you already have planned out your life, I would guarantee your plan mostly is about your failure. And don't sit there thinking about the dead. The dead will bury the dead, right? But the things in your life that have died, God has removed for his reasons. We don't know. There are things beyond us. However, there are things in front of us, and we don't know those either. And it isn't the way we think it is. Don't think because I failed so far, I will continue to fail. Don't think because things have not worked out so far, I have nothing to give. He gave you something to maintain, like a deposit. It's your job to hand over some hope to other people. It's your job to hand over your work to Jesus. And it's your job not to give up so you can still see the blessings that you haven't seen yet. And may God bless you.